Thank you, Jonah.
There we go.
And it's a gorgeous sunny day. I've actually been getting hot in the afternoon, which is a strange sensation in this area. But in the sunshine, it's quite warm. Um, so welcome aboard. I'm happy to introduce you today to Patrick Cleary, who's president of Lost Coast Communications, which is an independent media company which offers the Lost Coast Outpost and 4 FM radio stations. KHUM, K-SLUG, I'd never heard that one, The Point, and The Lounge. He's been president of Lost Coast Communications since 2003. He was former general manager of KHSU-FM, former executive director of Humboldt Area Foundation, and former general manager of the North Coast Co-op. He just can't stay out of trouble. He likes to keep advancing his curiosity and impact. Before moving to Humboldt in 1997, he was managing director for media and telecommunications at Chase Manhattan Bank. So he comes with a very interesting perspective for today's world. Patrick, it's all yours. We're happy to have you here and go for it.
Thank you, Jane. Let's see if I can do this again now. We'll go with this here. Okay. So real briefly before I start the conversation, I want this to be interactive, so please feel free to please ask questions is what I'm trying to say. I shouldn't multitask and
talk at the same time.
Right? Talk at the same time. I know.
You could put your conversations and your questions in chat if you'd like. He can stop periodically. You can raise your hand, and if one of us sees it, we'll respond. Otherwise, I think you're going to stop periodically and ask anybody if they have questions, right?
That's right. Yeah. Let's go. Okay. Is that visible now?
That is visible. It's perfect.
Okay. Then let's just start in. So, just so we're all on the same page here. What's media? And media, is just a form of communications that reaches people widely. It is something that is, as opposed to direct communication such as an email, it's a way of communicating information that reaches the masses. And we'll talk about all the different options of media and how people are consuming it and which ones are available here.
Patrick, for some reason on your presentation, it's showing the next slide.
Oh, is it still doing that?
Yeah, it's showing the next slide. It wasn't before.
Okay, let me.
You have some way to get rid of that?
I think so. Hold on.
I like the seal.
Let's do it again.
There you go. Now it's showing the slides on the left. So go to slideshow at the top.
Here we go. And okay, I got it now. Yeah. How's that?
It's still showing the extra. Go to the slideshow at the top. There you go. You're good.
Okay. I'm good. Okay. So my surprise slide for everybody, when I first moved here in 1997, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal said that Humboldt County was the micropolitan broadcast capital of the United States. I've always liked the word micropolitan. And, micropolitan being a community that, sort of resembles a city, but in a smaller area. And they tend to view Arcata, Eureka combined as a micropolitan area. And what they were saying at the time was we had more broadcast media than other similar communities throughout the United States. Um, and I think since then, the world has changed. The world has changed. We've got the internet, first of all. In 1998, we barely had the internet. Um, we've had a lot of ownership consolidation. The FCC in 1996 allowed people to own multiple radio stations, multiple television stations, both in the same market and across the country. And also, for reasons that we'll get into a little bit later, the number of reporters in newsrooms has dropped considerably during this time frame. We're down, close to, two-thirds to three-quarters of reporters. And then more recently, many of you know this, but the Congress eliminated all the funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which affected a great number of the public television stations and public radio stations. Locally, amazingly, since that time, we had more radio stations sign on the air. There were probably about 8 or 10 altogether. Jefferson Public Radio was not here back in 98. K-SLUG was not here back then. There are a number of other stations that have created, but as we get more stations, there's less local content, and that is a trend that has been going on throughout the United States, starting with a company called Clear Channel, who figured out that they could serve the same programming in Dallas and Denver, and aside from changing the little ID at the top of the hour, many people would not notice. Just talking about Humboldt County, also for a while, there was sort of a glory period of the early 2000s, 2005 to 2008, when we had the Eureka Reporter as a daily newspaper, and that forced the Times Standard and all the other papers to really increase their news, and we had a very vibrant local news program at that point. But as you know, the Eureka Report, I believe, closed in 2009 or 2010, and then we've also had the closing of a number of other local newspapers: the Fortuna Beacon, the Independent down in Garberville, and the Redwood Times down in Garberville. But just looking at our local media, and this slide here, we're going to look at newspapers and news sites. And on the newspaper news site front, there's really only one outlet that's not locally owned, which is the Times Standard. And they're owned by Alden Media, which is a hedge fund that bought digital first. But aside from that, we have the Lost Coast Outpost, we have the North Coast Journal, and the Ferndale Enterprise, which are both owned by Melissa Sanderson. We have the Mad River Union, which is owned by Jack Durham and Kevin Hoover. And we have Redheaded Black Belt by Kim Kemp. And those are really some vibrant news outlets for a small community. On the television side, not the same story. As you'll see, I was talking about multiple ownership. The NBC and CBS affiliates, which have been sold numerous times over the last decade, are now owned by a group out of Wyoming called Marquee Broadcasting. And then the ABC and Fox affiliates are owned by Sinclair, which is probably the largest owner in terms of number of stations in the country right now. So the only local television that we have is Keat TV. which, as I mentioned earlier, has been really hit hard by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting cuts. And then Access Humboldt, which is a very big resource to us, which is funded out of cable television fees. And interesting enough, so if you subscribe to cable television from Optimum, Optimum pays a fee to support Access Humboldt. But one of the big changes that is going on is that they do not get fees for internet service. So if you're getting your internet from Optimum, there is no money going to Access Humboldt at that point. And people have been doing what they call cutting the cord, which is kind of a misnomer because they're generally keeping the internet, but they're no longer subscribing to cable television per se and going to over-the-top streaming services. So we'll talk about that a little bit more here. But that's sort of the overview of just the print and online TV news. On the radio side, we have 15 commercial radio stations, which are owned by four different groups. Two of those groups are local. Lost Coast Communications, which is a local group that includes myself and the Blue Lake Rancheria and a number of other local people. And then Eureka Radio, which is owned by Brian Papstein, and has been around in his family since the 1950s. There's a group called Bicoastal Media, which owns 5 TV stations here locally. But as you might imagine, by their name, they're not based here. They're bicoastal. Their ownership is actually based mostly in Pennsylvania. And then there's a group, Mad River Radio, which is based in LA. And those are the commercial stations. And then we have the non-commercial stations, which you can see we have a plethora of radio stations here locally, including 4 of them, which are owned by Cal Poly Humboldt. Not everybody recognizes that, but in addition to KHSU, they operate Radio Bilingua, which I think went on the air somewhere around 2018. They operate a BBC repeater on 2 different frequencies. And then they have the student station, KRFH, which is on 105.1. Jefferson Public Radio operates 2 stations here. They have the News and Informations and their classical station, which also does NPR programming. We have Educational Media Foundation, which is a religious station that broadcasts K-Love. And then we have, a whole group of other interesting stations. I guess the most prominent, which and really deserves special treatment, is KMUD. KMUD has been around since, I believe, the 80s. They are a community station in the best sense of the word, and they've had a news department that has been consistent in being able to broadcast local news. And they are, truly volunteer DJs providing the, local programming all the time. In addition, there's Blue Ox has a low power station that's very eclectic and locally programmed. Access Humboldt also operates a radio station where they rebroadcast a lot of the public meetings as well as news talk programs as well. They have an excellent news talk program. I think it's on Thursday nights that sort of took the place of KHSU's Thursday Night Talk. And then you have Humboldt Hot Air, which is a lot of the disc jockeys who were formerly associated with KHSU have gone over to Humboldt Hot Air, and I think it was last year they finally got an on-air frequency as opposed to just being um, an internet-based station. Um, so that's sort of just a quick overview of our local media. I did want to mention real quickly that Harvard University has a think tank called Nieman Labs. They looked at the top 25 for-profit news sites, and actually, our Lost Coast Outpost is number 5 in the country for-profit news sites in terms of visitors, which is, shows that Humboldt County has always had a great interest in information and media, more so than other places. I cannot see my chat function here. Is there anything that I need to address before I move on?
No, it's a blank slate so far.
Okay. Well,
What do you attribute our amazing status nationwide? Do you have some idea? Is it because of Cal Poly or because of the educated nature of the uh, inhabitants here? Are
I
we
think
some
that
specialized group?
no, I think I mean, I think um, Humboldt County has always had, and I think Cal Poly is part of the answer, but um, there's just a lot of interest in other places in Humboldt County. I think that people like to know what's going on with their neighbors. It's a relatively close-knit community, and people want to keep up with things. So, I think that's, and then the other factor in terms of just having all those radio stations and television stations is that we're far away from any place else. So that there's the big issue with radio is not interfering with stations from adjacent areas. And because of our location behind the Redwood Curtain, we are we're pretty far from anywhere. So there's a lot of frequencies that can be used.
So there are a lot of frequencies available, in other words.
Yeah, and during the last 20 years, people definitely took advantage of that and launched radio stations.
Who do they have to get permission from?
That's the Federal Communications Commissions, the FCC.
So they're not
And
trying to shut us down.
no, they're not really interested in shutting us down. We're small potatoes out here.
Thank
So,
you.
and then something that we were talking about right before we started, but Humboldt County is increasingly connected by the internet. Those of you who remember back when I first moved here, we had one fiber optic cable came up Highway 101, and it would get cut on a regular basis, which meant that all the ATM machines would go down, and we would be very isolated. And then in late 2009, they built a second cable across Highway 36, and that allowed for redundancy, which improved our reliability. Recently, the world's longest fiber optic cable was just landed from Singapore, came up out through the harbor there in Samoa, and is connected to the data center in downtown Arcata. There's another cable being built across Highway 299, providing yet another level of redundancy. And now there's a new local company, Vero, that is supplying fiber optic connectivity to the home, competing with AT&T and Optimum. So I think that's actually fairly significant in terms of what we're going to see in terms of workforce, because tech companies now can reliably locate up here and not worry about losing internet connection.
Who actually owns that data center?
I
And
don't
it's
know.
always, pardon me?
I don't know. I've been told that Google is somehow involved, but a lot of these tech companies operate very secretly.
It was been a big secret.
Yeah.
And
Um,
it's kind of interesting. Isn't there any local control over something like that?
Over internet, no.
I mean, in the building of the data center, did that go
Well,
through?
I mean, obviously the city of Arcata permitted it.
Yeah.
And you may notice that they changed their fencing recently in
Yeah,
response
there
to.
was a little ejection to the wire on the top, wasn't there?
Yes, yes. So it's a little visually more pleasing.
There is a question. Is there still a radio station in Hoopa? Is there print media out that way?
There is both of those, and I apologize. Oh, I did mention I had on the slide. I didn't mention KIDE, and which is owned by the Hooper tribe, is a great radio station out there. It's hard to hear outside of Hoopa, but within Hoopa, it is 100% locally programmed. And there is the Two Rivers Tribune out in Hoopa as well, which is actually a really good newspaper. And I need to fix my slides to add that.
Yeah. There's also a comment. Humboldt has a lot of media outlets and also a lot of school districts considering our population. Cleary
Right.
and Del Norte have one school. Did you write this? Have one school district each. Humboldt has over 30 or used to when I was more in the know.
I think that number is, as terms of school districts, is still about that level. Periodically, they consolidate one school district, but yes, it is. I used to say this about nonprofits in Humboldt County too, that Humboldt County says, why have one nonprofit if you can have five doing the same thing? Um,
And you have a question, what do the numbers to the far right on your chart indicate, like the 14,920?
that is the average. I didn't carry over my slide from here. It's the average audience from the last survey that was done in Humboldt County.
And when was that?
That was 2023.
So it's
So
recent. Yeah.
relatively recent, but getting 3 years old. So you can see, there are a couple commercial stations like K-SLUG and Power 96 that have, a lot of younger listeners. And then the KHSU number up here, the 14,000, is about half of what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. And it changed when they kicked out the community, right?
When they kick out the community, they lost a lot of listeners there, lost at least half their audience. And you'll see KMUD's audience numbers are quite significant. Um, KMUD is, again, a true community station.
Okay, let's see. What do the numbers to the far right indicate? What company did the survey was the question.
Eastland, it's called, the company is Eastland up here. They're a radio survey company. They do phone surveys, which are challenging these days because of telemarketers. But um, it's still they do about a 500 person survey, which is starts to get fairly reliable when you do a survey of that size.
Is Access Humboldt going to survive? That's my question. Because with the cutoff in cable and the cutoff, I also had heard that uh, Optimum was trying to eliminate that requirement.
I'm not. The cable company is always trying to eliminate that requirement.
They haven't succeeded.
Yeah, they have not succeeded so far, but they only have to succeed once. I think that they have a really excellent management in Christina Jeffers. I know they're relocating their facilities. Um, you know, I certainly hope they do. I think and we'll talk about this a little bit. The transparency of being able to watch the city council meetings and the board of supervisors meetings from home, certainly encourages engagement in our communities. So I'm hopeful they will survive, but their fundamental business model is eroding.
That's what I was concerned about.
Yes, no, and I think we all should be concerned about it. And if anybody feels like giving a contribution to Access Humboldt, they would be greatly appreciate it.
How do they do that? Just
They're a nonprofit like anybody else. You could send them a check or go
okay.
to their website.
Because they enable people to zoom in and participate and give public comment without being there. That's the beauty of it. I've used it.
It's a beautiful thing,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, Sean McLaughlin really built that, and really built a lot of infrastructure and a lot of advocacy around how to improve local community, and they also originate their own programming aside from that. So they're definitely a community asset that we're blessed with, and not every community has anything like that.
Thank you.
So, um, just talking a little bit, where do people get their news these days? It's changing. This is just over the last 5 years, but what you'll see is, roughly 60% of people get their news from some sort of digital device, whether it's a computer or a phone, an iPad. Um, Television is often has been the source of news traditionally for the vast majority of Americans. That is declining, but still significant. Um, Radio, slightly declining as well, but place. Um, Newspapers and magazines have really been dropping off. And to some extent, that's replaced by online news sites. So, I do not have access to the Times Standard circulation, but I'm told it's the print circulation has dropped from about 25,000 to about less than 3,000 right now.
Well, they've
Maybe.
increased their prices from when I started getting it, it was about $75, and last bill was 400 and something.
Well, it's expensive to
I
deliver
know.
paper to your home.
I know.
Um, and the labor involved and everything else is significant. So we can sort of see that change. Um, the other thing that's kind of scary to me is that Americans as a whole are paying less attention to the news. And I don't know if that's a factor of fatigue, um, but that is definitely a trend that is going on within the on a macro basis. We don't have this sort of detail locally. This is Pew Research Center conducting this. So the number of people following news very closely, only about 20% of us do.
Do you think that has something to do with the nature of the news that's coming out and the dominance of a particular figure?
I, I'm gonna
You're going to
I'm
sidestep
gonna
that.
let that comment stand.
Yeah.
Um, but I think here's a better sort of viewpoint of where we're getting our news and how we're consuming media, and you can see the change in phones from 45 minutes 15 years ago on average to over 4 hours, which is a little longer than my phone tells me I'm on it every day, but not a lot. That is where we get our news. Interesting enough, the other media haven't declined quite as much as you might think. We're just consuming more now. It used to be 7 hours a day was what people would consume in terms of media. Now it's up to about 10 hours a day. Um, but again, television is still about 4 hours. Um, but declining. Radio, you know, still declining. The interesting thing about radio is that people still listen to the radio, but not quite as long as they used to. And then you can see how magazines have just really almost gone away as far as a source of media. Um, yeah, so how much time do we spend with different media? Um, Traditional television still about 2.5 hours a day. Subscription OTT, this is a fancy word for streaming services. So Netflix, Amazon, Apple TV, all that stuff. You can see that it is becoming a significant portion of where people spend their time. Um, Social networks. Um, and one of the things I do want to point out about this slide here, and I heard the statistic at a conference a couple years ago, and it really disturbed me. But 25% of young people get their news from YouTube. And there was a lot of concern about how YouTube feeds can be manipulated to create echo chambers in terms of news as things. Digital audio is things like Sirius, XM, Spotify, um, Apple Music, all that. It's actually now getting more listening than radio itself. Um, and, then print, you know, really as a decline of something that we spend time with. And then where's the money going? Because I always find that to reveal a lot of stuff. And you can see that the increase in advertising online is just enormous compared to what's happening with the other media. And that is mostly Facebook and Google. Um, you look at your Google search now. If you search for anything, probably your first 5 or 6 options are all paid for ads. You look at your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed, and you'll see lots and lots of ads there. Um, and where's it taking the money from? Well, you can see what it's done to newspapers. So you can see why the newsrooms are down 3/4 um, in terms of staffing. And to another degree, radio and local television, magazines. I gave this presentation recently, and some young person asked me what yellow pages were. They didn't even know. I can't find any data for yellow page advertising at this point. I know it's still there because I do get a book occasionally, but that used to be a very significant outlet for advertising. And then billboards are ironically increasing. Probably the oldest advertising medium. I don't know if 2,000 years ago they had, Fred's restaurant turned left at next cave or something. But and then podcasts, not a lot of money in podcasts. There's a little announcement, but generally people, if they want to listen to podcasts, they don't want to hear ads. And then what's the forecast for the next couple of years? And you can see the internet is expected to continue to grow. Broadcast television is expected to continue to decline. Radio, they're saying, should be stable. Billboards, again, starting to grow a little bit. Newspapers continuing to shrink, magazines continuing to shrink. Not a lot of money in podcast. And then, this digital music streaming, not a lot of advertising in there. That's a lot of, though, the interesting thing when you look at Spotify, you have an option of an ad-supported listening experience or a subscription one. 90% take the advertising supported thing. So only 10% will pay for a ad-free service. And that we see that, of course, across news sites and other things that people tolerate advertising rather than paying for ad-free platforms. And then I just, wanted to kind of make a pitch that the term the fourth estate comes from France, to refer to the importance of a free press. And that, a free press is what keeps a democracy healthy because it creates transparency, allows us to know what's going on. And across the country, we're seeing news deserts where you really don't have access to information. And some of these places, they may have media, they may have local television stations, but the television stations are not necessarily producing local news. The newspapers have been, stripped down to the point where their local news content is pretty minimal. And I just like this last quote that, while having local news media doesn't guarantee good government, its absence almost guarantees worse government. So it becomes a really important aspect of any community. And I'm afraid that's all I got, but I'll take
That's
more
a
questions.
lot. That's a lot. Um, where do you, I guess it's not clear when you lay out the stations what attitude they have, what what kinds of news they're presenting, and how it's slanted one direction or the other. Um, we have an enormous number of stations, and the issue is to what extent the only one that appears to be, I mean, how many of our local stations aren't slanted in terms of radio or television or things like that?
Oh boy, aren't slanted. Um, I mean, some people think NPR is slanted. Um, let me just go over the ones that do news, and we'll start over here. Um, all of Bicoastal's radio stations have a 1 minute cut in terms of local news. Um, KINS, which it calls itself conservative news talk. I think that's indisputable. Is a 24-hour talk and news based station. Um, on Lost Coast, they all the stations there get their news primarily fed from either interviews or the Lost Coast Outpost. Um, you know, KHSU they've brought back a little bit of local programming. They have cut-ins during NPR. Stephanie McGarry um, will come in. Um, Jefferson Public Radio has a lot of news, but it tends to be more focused on Ashland, Medford area, hence their name. That's where their studios are. KMUD, you got to give them credit. They do a great job on local news. KIDE for Hoopa News, Access Humboldt for rebroadcasting. Um, and then I think on the television side, um, KIEM still has a local news broadcast at I think it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, and 11 o'clock. That is still locally produced. The Sinclair stations are out of Reading, so we get the Reading news. They do send a reporter over here occasionally, and then obviously Access Humboldt in terms of just having the unfiltered access to local government. So, Jane, did that answer your question?
In part, I
Okay.
mean, things changed when Sinclair bought two of the radio stations, I mean, the television stations.
Yes.
That radically, weren't they previously locally owned?
Not locally owned. We haven't had they were actually owned by Chester Smith, who was a great country western singer. for many years. But they did have local programming. And you may recall, I mean, at least when I moved here, in 97, we had KIEM had, Jane Rogers as their host. KVIQ had Dave Silverbrand. Um, KAEF had Leslie Lawler. There was three local news um, stations that competed heavily with themselves. And as far as, the local television stations go, that's about the only programming they create. Everything else is either their network fed or local syndicated programming that they purchase.
Okay, another few questions here. May we get copies of your slides, please? And thank you. What was that?
That was my Siri answering a question. Sorry.
Oh, can we get copies of your slides if we?
Absolutely.
Okay, if you send them to me or to Ollie or both, we'll make them available upon
I'd be
request.
I'd be happy to share them.
Yeah, and I find that, let's see, I find that many people don't understand the difference between news and opinion. Talk about that for a minute, please.
News versus opinion. Um, I think a lot of you know, the classics of journalism in terms of news are, who, what, where, why, how, the basic facts, laying out the facts. And I think that's something that in certainly in a newspaper environment, that was considered to be journalism, whereas they also would have what they called op-ed pages. Um, where people can express opinions and say, these facts, reveal a trend this way or that way. What you'll find in particular, and I think it's fair to say with the news talk stations in particular, there's a lot of an opinion. There's a lot of discussion. Rush Limbaugh as the classic example of somebody who would, express his opinion about what was going on. And I think you see a lot of that. You see a lot of that on certainly Fox News, um, MSNBC, a lot of people, who are, um, you know, to be charitable, I'll say they're trying to interpret the news for you. You might say they're just trying to sell their viewpoint of their news to you, and the aspect of repetition. If you repeat um, if you repeat something over and over enough, people begin to believe it's true. Um, and I think a lot of us have read about on television, Sinclair in particular, enforcing certain stories on their local news broadcast. Um, I have to be honest, I don't watch much local. I certainly don't watch Sinclair's news very often. So I have not noticed that, but it is a trend where people are selectively presenting facts as well. And I think that is a big challenge is that, and you saw the slide earlier about people who are paying close attention to the news. Um, we're overwhelmed these days by news sources, and it's hard to sort. What do you believe? How do you believe it? One of the things that I always question somebody is, when they say, well, I read something on the internet, and I said, who? I mean, I think we really need to pay attention to the sources, and are they trustworthy?
Could you speak to the feasibility of restoring KHSU to a thriving community station?
That is totally up to the university. I think, I have not met the new president of Cal Poly, so I do not know what his take is on it. I know that Tom Jackson's point of view was he didn't think that students listened to radio. And so he wasn't interested in investing money. And, the university, when I was there as general manager, was supporting it to the degree of about 250,000 a year directly, as well as picking up a lot of indirect costs, such as the electricity and things like that. So it was a budget item in the university. Um, you know, I mean, basically these things do cost money. And what KHSU did do when they farmed it out basically to Capital Public Radio, um, that was an attempt to try to cut their cost. Unfortunately, Capital Public Radio wound up being a bit of a fiasco with their own scandal, and they lost the Corporation for Public Broadcasting money even before it was eliminated. So KHSU lost that funding. So in order to bring it back, it would take a commitment either by the university or by some funders, whether that be listeners or some major funders to bring it back. But there's no reason why that couldn't happen to any station in this market to bring back that sort of format. They still, NPR, we have options on NPR stations as well.
And then has anyone else noticed that sometimes the television stations and cable connected have a glitch when a controversial or liberal content is broadcast?
I have not noticed that, but that might not. I mean, particularly, I have not heard that. I mean, it could be something that happens, perhaps more with the Sinclair stations. Um, but a lot of the broadcasting these days, I mean, very few people actually get their television with rabbit ears, especially since they went digital and the power went down on a lot of those stations. So it's been, you're generally getting it through the cable company. And I think one thing that's worth noting is that the cable company has to pay those local television stations to carry them. It's one of the requirements under the FCC, and it's become a significant portion of those television station revenues. If that were to change and the cable companies were not required to pay for the local programming stations, our local television would be in a lot more trouble. Because honestly, video is expensive to produce. And it takes a lot of work, even to do a half-hour news segment takes multiple people do that day in and day out.
Do local news producers get any payback from internet republishes?
Let's see. I mean, I do know that I can speak to Lost Coast Outpost, and there is Google and Facebook do both pay the Lost Coast Outpost to use some of their content. And then, digital creators on YouTube, if you get above a certain level, can earn money from creating content. But it's not lots.
So could you comment on the paywall use in local news sources?
I mean, the paywall, the only one locally is the Times Standard does use a paywall. And, they're trying to replace the circulation revenue that they used to get. I think there's always the trade-off. If you have a paywall, again, 90% of people won't pay for it. So 10% will. Um, I know that there was a sort of a famous radio station down in Santa Cruz, K-Pig, that had a huge internet following, and they went with the paywall, and they lost 90% of their subscribers, and they started making money for the first time. Um, so, it's a dilemma that everybody faces, and um, I think what we've seen with the large um, media outlets, the New York Times, Washington Post, I mean, they'll give you a certain number of articles and then they require you subscribe. Um, Wall Street Journal is very tough on that, like no free articles. Um, there was a famous quote when the internet started, and the quote was, Information wants to be free." Um, but there was a second half of that quote that rarely got repeated, which is also said, "But information also wants to be expensive." And I think what we're finding is that in order to get information, to some degree, it's going to cost, how do you pay for reporters?
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's the dilemma. And, I can assure you that people don't get rich being reporters. It's not a profession you go into to become a millionaire. But, it's nonetheless, as advertising drops away, how do you pay for your news? Um, and that's the dilemma, and that's why I think, supporting things like K-Mud and Access Humboldt and our local stations, uh, Keat TV, helps us fund a lot of these things. Reading the Lost Coast Outpost, reading Redheaded Black Belt.
Would you, this is going to sound like a really ignorant question. Uh, what's a paywall? Is it the point at which you are required to pay to get the news, or
Exactly.
and how is it established?
Oh, it'll pop up.
Well, I've seen it. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
no, yeah,
They'll give you an intro to the article, and then if you want to read
yeah.
the rest, pay me.
Yeah, well, and in particular, that we have this thing called cookies. So it'll track how many times you've been there before. Um, but
Well, what
basic,
does it do with that information?
oh, whatever. I mean, in a perfect world, it will sell it to an advertiser and say, "Hey, I got Jane here, and Jane likes to watch ads, for women's shoes." And all of a sudden, you'll start seeing women's shoes in your feeds.
That that happens in many media, most media
Yeah,
anyway.
no, I mean, I think for the most part, cookies are ubiquitous. You get the little disclaimer in the beginning saying, "Hey, by the way, if you want to read this, we're going to put a cookie in there, and you can limit. You can say only the necessary cookies, or give me all the cookies."
Or none of the cookies.
Well, if you say absolute none, they'll say, "Well, then we don't want to show you the article."
Uh-huh. I've
So,
been playing with that to see what happens.
yeah.
All right. Any other questions from anybody? Now's your chance. Yes, no? This has been wonderful. What would you say is uh, since you are so involved with Lost Coast Outpost, how is it working in terms of being a viable, economically viable operation? And what do you find works to make it work best?
Um, I mean, I think the advantage of a news site versus newspaper obviously is lower cost. We don't have print, we don't have paper, we don't have distribution. You really only have reporters um, and you have to pay for some cloud storage. Um, the downside is that um, advertising on those mediums um, it has gone through a sort of a peak and is being gradually eroded by Google and Facebook. So Lost Coast Outpost is modestly, contributes to the overall operations of Lost Coast. Um, and I think really trying to just focus on that and focus on, I mean, there are options. You can go ad free with that. And I should say, actually, it's my hope with all of Lost Coast Communications. I have a really wonderful partner in the Blue Lake Rancheria, and they have expressed some desire to potentially become 100% owner of that media empire, which would make empire. It's not really an empire, as you can see. There's a lot of competition, um, but it's I think it would be really wonderful to have somebody like um, the tribe who is based here and can never ever move from here because that's who they are. Um, be one of the owners of local media because I think local ownership is really important.
Do you think if you did something like that, that would change the nature of of what's covered?
They've
Or
been my partner since 2005, and they've never said a word
oh wow.
about what's covered. No, I don't think so.
And
I think they understand the importance of editorial freedom. It's one of the things that when Hank Sims and I first launched the idea for the Lost Coast Outpost, I was very clear that um, I don't tell Hank what to write. And I've learned the hard way when I've tried to tell Hank what to write that he will definitely not write it. Um, you know, so I think the traditional editorial model was that the editor in chief, which is Hank Sims, gets to decide what the content is. And my role with Lost Coast has always been that of publisher, so that I'm responsible for the business side of things.
so that has worked well.
It has worked very well.
That's fantastic. Do you think Lost Coast Outpost has a point of view?
I think we all have a point of view, whether we want to admit it or not. Um, I think I think the Outpost has done a tremendous job at being thorough in its news analysis, of being engaging. I think their stories are um, not boring, but at the same time, I don't think I've never been able to detect a political slant. I think they go after everybody pretty much equally. Um, there was we had a long discussion with somebody who claimed that the Outpost was very liberal in its outlook, and we talked about Karen Paz Dominguez, who was um, a darling of a lot of the progressives locally, who gotten a lot of got the county in a fair amount of financial trouble, and the Outpost was pretty upfront and um, you know and transparent about its reporting. So I think most of the media, for the most part, I don't detect among the local people. I mean, does Kevin Hoover have an attitude when he does the police log at the Arcata, in the Mad River Union? Yeah, I think he does. I think it's wonderful. It's personal.
Well, any other questions from anybody? Now's your chance. Oh, okay, here. We have really appreciate this overview. As someone who has placed countless PSAs over the last 40 years, I feel fortunate that we have so many opportunities to get the word out about our community efforts. And then another one, media is so fractured now, it's hard to support anything. It used to be everybody read the paper and it supported journalists. Now there are so many ways to get information or not. Um, so I want to thank you all for coming today. If you are interested in getting a copy of the slides, either contact Ollie or contact me at janepwoodward@aol.com, and I'll be happy to send them out. And I want to let you know that next week on Monday, August 10th, Ann Lindsay and Kyle Solomon will be talking about what's new in the development of Humboldt Commons. We have a kind of regular update because things keep changing and updating with respect to that. But you're welcome to attend that. And any suggestions you ever have for, hey, I'd like to get a speaker about this, that, or the other, please feel free to let Ollie or me know, or encourage people to present a proposal for a talk they'd like to hear. We are a community, Ollie is a community service. We are trying to link to the community and create conversations between Cal Poly, Humboldt, and the community. So it's another vehicle. We are another medium in reality. If you want to think about it that way, we certainly are. So you can use us, you can submit proposals and get on the program here. I'd
I
love
think
to
Ollie
hear
is a
what you.
wonderful thing.
Oh, and the classes are great. I just went on the ship, the new research vessel. It was phenomenal. Uh, I was so delighted because you get to see, not only is it exciting to go out through the bay and out into the ocean, which, fortunately it wasn't terribly wavy that day, but you get to see the community from the interior point of view from the bay, and you understand better where everything is and how it relates to one another. So it's good to see the outer face of the community. So it's a wonderful thing to do. And you can get, I don't know whether there's still spaces on the Maticat, which is also coming up. But we have some wonderful treasures in this community, and we try through OLLI to let you know about those and experience them wherever possible. So thank you very much for being here today, Patrick. We appreciate what you're doing. You've contributed in so many ways to this community. So
Oh,
thank
thank you,
you ever
Jane.
so much. Don't think it's not recognized. All right.